So welcome everyone. It's really lovely to see you in this virtual room. I'm Rini Paul. I am a GP in North London and one of the teacher development leads for QMEC, which is King's Undergraduate Medical Education in the Community. And we provide teaching for our medical students across hundreds of practices and thousands of GP tutors and students working with us. And during the pandemic, we had our first collaboration with Katie Amiel and the Bigger Picture, really as a thank you to our GP teachers who were working throughout the pandemic and continuing to teach our students and educate the next generation of doctors. And so I'm really delighted that we are continuing to collaborate with Katie and the Bigger Picture, because I think we all need these spaces and opportunities to come together and to still sort of appreciate one another and all the things we're going through. It's still not an easy time. So I'll introduce Katie Amiel, who is a GP in Hackney, a mindfulness-based cognitive therapy teacher. In fact, I was on, I think, Katie's very first cohort of GP students many, many years ago. And actually, so I want to thank Katie because that's become a regular practice of mine, daily, especially through the pandemic. And Katie set up the Bigger Picture collaboration, works with many wonderful organisations, so the Royal College of GPs, the Practitioner Health Programme and Doctors in Distress, and we're one of the collaborators that work with the Bigger Picture, really to support healthcare professionals' well-being through the arts and humanities. And Katie is the co-editor of These Are the Hands. I'm sure you've all seen this amazing NHS anthology of poetry written by NHS staff. I think it's amazing that apparently the book has now raised nearly £10,000. So if you haven't got a copy of your own, then do go buy it because it's raising money for NHS charities together. So a really good cause. And I'm delighted that Katie will share some of the poems today from there. As I say, Katie and the Bigger Picture collaboration are working with many other organisations, and I added in the links right at the beginning. So you've got everyone's Twitter and Instagram handles if you're on social media, but also there are a few spaces available in a creative writing group that Katie is working with. So the link is there if you guys are interested. So our main speaker today, and the reason I'm sure that most of you are here, is Dr. Liz Riordan, who is a really, really inspirational international speaker, broadcaster, podcaster, award-winning co-author of The Complete Guide to Breast Cancer, How to Feel Empowered and Take Control. I've heard Liz speak a couple of times, and she's actually spoken to a very small group of my medical students who were sort of gobsmacked and in awe. I'm always really struck by her honesty and vulnerability. So you are, in for a treat today if you've never heard her speak before, and if you have, then you will definitely get something out of it. So Liz talks about her journey of being a breast cancer surgeon who got breast cancer. Before we start, just a quick reminder, you guys have all done it beautifully, sort of muted yourselves. As I say, we are recording the session, so those who couldn't join us today can catch up and watch it. But it's lovely if you're able to have your cameras on so we can see you and feel like we're in a virtual space together. just a reminder that, you know, if anything particularly touches you or kind of, you know, triggers you, you know, I know we are still going through multiple traumas today, so I just, an invitation to look after yourselves, do what you need to look after yourselves and each other. So being kind of respectful. We want this to be a really safe space. And thank you for those of you for introducing yourselves or telling us where you're tuning in from. And so I don't think I have anything else I want to say. I'm going to hand over to Katie and Liz, and we'll just keep an eye on time. And if you have any questions, there'll be time at the end, so you can either put them in the chat or we might have an opportunity to just kind of raise your hands and come to you then. Katie, shall I hand over to you first or to Liz directly? Liz, I think it's you.
Over to me. Okay, let me share my screen. So thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. I still find it crazy that I'm now talking about my story, because back in 2015, I was a very shy, introverted breast cancer surgeon who mainly spoke about triathlons and baking on Twitter. And my life has changed in so many ways. And this is a slide that I normally put at the end of my talks from the amazing American cardiologist, Eric Topol. And this is an incredible book talking about how patients are changing the power dynamic in the healthcare relationship. With the advent of smartphones and the internet and ultrasound machines you can buy yourself, patients have got a lot more power and a lot more control of their data. And it really made me realize that the patient is the single most unused person in healthcare, because in almost every conference you go to or every panel you hear speak, there aren't patients there. And as a doctor at a breast surgical conference, patients were always put in the nursing section. And if they were in my area, I'd go and network. I don't need to listen to patients. I'm here to get gossip and to find out how to treat them. And it was only when I was at a conference for women with metastatic breast cancer in Portugal, and they had patients speak in between the keynote lecturers, so you couldn't leave the room. And I saw this 25-year-old woman who was pregnant with metastatic breast cancer talk, and I went, wow, there's so much I didn't know. And that feeling was only enhanced when I became a patient myself. It took me being a patient to realize how important they really were, which is ridiculous to say. Now, this was me in my old day job as a consultant breast surgeon scrubbing, and I loved my job. I always wanted to be a surgeon from when I was 7. I was obsessed with the human body. I just fascinated by the idea that my hands could make people better. And although I loved every single speciality as I went through my training, I didn't like being on call. I got very, very, very stressed because I was being asked to do more and more things that I didn't feel comfortable with. I'm one of those people that say, just show me one more time. Just show me one more time. And when they force me, there is sweat dripping down my back and my legs, thinking, this is horrible. And then I spoke to one of my mentors who said, you pick this medical speciality by the body fluid you mind the least. Poo, spit, snot. I have sweaty armpits as a breast surgeon, and there's no on-call. But another reason I chose breast surgery was because every operation was different, because every breast is different. And it's a bit like dressmaking and origami. I can recreate a breast and I can recreate a nipple out of almost nothing. And to see women afterwards feeling almost complete again was just the best thing in the world. I've had women flash me in Sainsbury's. Literally, I'm there with my basket with all my shit to eat because my husband's on call at the weekend, and they lift their top and we go, doctor, look. I don't recognize the face, but I recognize the breast. They were just so pleased with the results. I loved being able to have that impact. Plus, no on call. Did I say that again for anyone considering what speciality to go into? People don't die on me. And I get a lot of time to talk with patients, and I really liked it. But it was actually slowly destroying me. And I didn't get what the job would be like until I became a consultant, because my job involved breaking women. On a Friday, I would call it double maths, and I'd spend the morning doing a post-op results clinic, having to tell women their margins weren't clear, their lymph nodes were positive, they needed chemotherapy, dealing with all that unexpected emotion, anger, grief, fear of death, fear of hair loss. And then in the afternoon, after a non-existent lunch break, I would have my biopsy results clinic, where I'd have to tell women from screening, it's cancer. And it felt like I was being paid to break women, to make them cry. And then I had to go home and be a wife and a friend. And someone once asked me, surely you get counselling? No, it's all part of the job. We deal with this huge gamut of human emotions, from patients, from their partners, for their family. And we're just expected to deal with it. Really, really, really hard. No one to talk to. I was often the last person at the end of the clinic left pushing the note trolley up, thinking, God, I've made so many women cry, but I didn't know. It was really, really hard. How do you cope when you spend your life breaking people and you try to do it well? And you start off at the beginning of the day thinking, right, this is going to be a good day. But by come 5 o'clock, to find that same level of empathy and kindness to give everybody the best of you is really, really hard. And I think that leads us beautifully into a poem by Katie.
Thank you, Liz. So one of the things we really wanted to do in this anthology was give a voice to NHS staff. And one of the chapters in the book is called The Other Side, and it touches on healthcare professionals' experiences of when they become patients. And this poem touches on a lot of what Liz has just talked about, both the experience of getting results, but also the toll on healthcare professionals of constantly giving results and giving bad news. And it's by Iora Dawes, who's a medical social worker, and it's called Day of the Results. Nothing much has changed. Dawn arrives at the specified time. The cat leaps at a butterfly and misses. A fox ambles down the middle of the road. Except everything has changed. I sit in a room with no view, where thousands have sat before, heavy with the weight of days and nights of not knowing, hearing the surgeon explain histology that brooks no nuance, that shall have dominion, in a voice tempered with a kind of love for another human being. Watching his face, imagining the toll of giving bad news year after year, and when done, thanking, not for the news, but for the manner of the giving. Thank you.
Wow. It's really emotional to hear that and make me think how often patients thank us for telling them bad news, and how I hope that I was able to give that to the women I saw. You don't know what it's like until you've been on the other side. And then suddenly I was on the other side, because when I was 40, I went from being a fit, healthy triathlete to a stage 3 breast cancer patient overnight. And it turned my world upside down in so many ways. I'd had a couple of breast cysts, and I just thought I had another cyst. I'd had a mammogram 6 months earlier. It was all normal. I wasn't worried. This lump just appeared in my cleavage overnight, and I thought, oh, it's another cyst. It's round. And I'm a breast surgeon, so I should know what it was. And it was only my mum that made me get it checked out, because she was worried. And I saw a surgeon, not in the hospital where I worked, but in the hospital down the road where my husband was a surgeon, mainly because I didn't want my own team talking about me. And the mammogram was normal, and I had an ultrasound, and I turned to look at the screen because I did ultrasounds myself and I'm nosy. And I saw a cancer. And unlike the drip feed that most patients get, you have a biopsy and a result, you have surgery and a result. In that split second, I knew it was cancer. I knew because it was big and I was young, I'd need chemotherapy. I knew I'd need a mastectomy. I had a pretty good idea what my 10-year survival rate was. And my surgeon came in before they did the biopsy, and she asked me, where do you want to be treated? And she called my husband down from clinic, and he said, it'll be fine. I was like, no, it's not. I'll be telling you in a week I've got breast cancer. It was the most surreal experience, and it felt like I shut down. I was up here looking at it happening to somebody else. It couldn't be happening to me. It was too ironic. How on earth could I possibly get through chemotherapy? And chemo was hard. I'm just going to see what my next slide is. Chemo was really, really hard. I used to tell women the basics before I pass them on to the oncologists. I say, you know, you might lose your hair, you'll get vaginal dryness. That was it. I'd never heard what my oncologist actually said to patients. And in a weird way, I was kind of excited to see what it would be like, the fear of the unknown, but also terrified about how bad it would actually be. And oh my God, it was nothing like I'd expected. Sat in the chemo unit, a good 20 or 30 years younger than all the older people in there, thinking, how the hell did they cope? Because I'm young and fit and I'm going to struggle. And having these drugs pour into you and then going home and waiting for the shit to start and not knowing how bad I was meant to feel and not knowing when to call for help and being a doctor and self-medicating. Things that got me, the hair loss. I knew you lost the hair on your head. And a good friend reached out to me. I didn't realize she'd had cancer. And I asked her, when should I book the head shave? And she said, well, your pubes will fall out on day 10. And I went, what? I'm a breast surgeon. I didn't realize you lost all your body hair. It's like your leg hair disappears overnight and bed bugs eat it. I had no idea. The fatigue, the bone crushing fatigue, and my brain went. I couldn't think, I couldn't function, from being a highly intelligent woman to someone who couldn't remember the word for a potato. And the worst thing for me was the constipation. I've done ward rounds where I'm writing up milk of magnesium and lactulose and fiber gel, looking at that gunk, thinking, thank God I never have to drink it. And I hadn't gone for 10 days. And I was sat naked on the toilet, crying with anal fissures and piles, just feeling I'd lost my pride, I'd lost my dignity. It stripped me of absolutely everything I had. It was so, so hard. And I think that brings us nicely on to the next poem from Katie.
Thank you, Liz. The next poem is by Julia Darling, who was a fantastic poet and author and passionate advocate for the importance of poetry in healthcare until her death when she was 48. And both her daughters, who I now know, have become NHS nurses. And this poem is called Chemotherapy. I did not imagine being bald at 44. I didn't have a plan. Perhaps a scar or two from growing old. Hot flushes, I'd sit fluttering a fan. But I am bald and hardly ever walk by day. I'm the invalid of these rooms, stirring soups, awake in the half dark, not answering the phone when it rings. I never thought that life could get this small, that I would care so much about a cup, the taste of tea, the texture of a shawl, and whether or not I should get up. I'm not unhappy. I have learnt to drift and sip. The smallest things are gifts. Thank you.
Wow. That really does ring true. You can find peace in the tiniest of moments and happiness in the tiniest of moments. And you're just grateful to hear the birds sing to get through another day. And no one can imagine what it's like until you've been through it. And it's just, what a poem is just, wow. Let's change subject. This is a ridiculous photo of me taking a selfie for my blog about to have my left breast cut off, because that's what you did back in the day. It's ridiculous. I found surgery really, really hard because I'm a surgeon and I like to be in control and I don't like people telling me what to do. And the first thing my surgeon said to me was, who do you want to treat you? Because I'm not sure I can. A lot of us will treat colleagues. And as a breast surgeon, I treat a lot of colleagues, but when they're close to you, it's really, really hard. The stakes are high. And I suddenly thought, I know everybody in the UK. Who do I pick? Do I go for an excellent centre like the Marsden or the Christie? Do I go by private or NHS? Do I go by who puts up the prettiest pictures in conferences or the best bedside manner? I also know who I wouldn't go to. Patients don't have that. And I'm sure we all know people that we wouldn't choose to go to. And what do we do about it? I don't know what the answer is. I decided to stay with her because it was local. My husband could come with me. I wouldn't have far to travel if there was a complication, but we had to stop being friends. And that was really, really hard. And when she was consenting me for surgery and I heard the risks of the anesthetic and blood clots and kidney problems and chronic pain, it's like, oh my God, this is serious. I blithely run through this 5 times a week, but when you are hearing it, it's really scary. And I had to stop telling her where to put the scar and what stitch to use with the drain. It was really, really hard. I had a reconstruction and I feel guilty, but it was because I was vain. I like wearing low-cut tops, and with small breasts, if I had a big bra with a prosthesis, I'd have to wear turtlenecks. And I felt guilty that that was my choice, but it was. And I remember everyone was crying on the day of the surgery because I was being operated on by people I'd worked with as a locum consultant. And they wheeled me into theatre. And as I was going down, I bumped into a couple of anaesthetists who I knew on their way. And they said, "Hi, Liz, what are you doing?" "I'm going to have my breast cut off, Jeremy. How are you?" And it's really awkward when you meet someone you know in the patient setting because you know them. And you're nosy, I'm nosy. You want to find out what's going on. But I would say to you, unless you're WhatsApping them every night and they're friends, you have to pretend you ignore them. And a gentle nod of the head and leave them be because you've broken their patient confidentiality privilege. It's a really awkward place to be in. And I was vulnerable, bold, no eyebrows, naked in a hospital gown. What I then realized was that anesthetic can burn like blimmin' heck. Propofol. The last thing I remember is screaming out in pain as it ran up my arm. I had no idea. And I'm a breast cancer surgeon. I then found out what it was like to really get bad news. Because after surgery and chemotherapy, all the scans had shown that my cancer had melted away completely. And I went back to get my results post-op and I dressed up, I'd drawn my eyebrows on, I got a hat, wearing a bit of makeup. And it was the 23rd of December. I was looking forward to Christmas. And I got to hear my surgeon say that there was 13 centimeters of cancer left in my breast and it had spread to 2 of my lymph nodes. And I had to come again. I remember nothing of what she said, but she had to go through further treatment, radiotherapy, complications, what would happen. And I'm like, no, hang on. I need to run out of here now and process it. And I suddenly got what it's like when a doctor is giving a patient their best information and you're like, hang on, this is new to me. Can I come back in a week with questions? So hard. So I had radiotherapy, I had more surgery, I had tamoxifen, and it took me a year to come back to work. I didn't realize that cancer patients are legally disabled and we have rights. And my line manager gave me a 4-week phase return to full-time work. And I said, hang on, I've had my own cancer. And I then got the BMA and Working with Cancer involved, who said, actually, they have to give you a longer phase return. And it was really, really hard going back to work because I knew how much pain a mastectomy could cause. I didn't want to cut anybody in case I hurt them. And every time I saw someone find out they had cancer, when I had to do it myself, I was in their position. You see them crumple, the stiff upper lip, the swallow, the squeeze of the partner's hand before COVID, just horrible. And I realized the words that we used to say, because I've seen everything. I've seen the really bad cases. I wanted to reassure women, it's just a bit of cancer, you're lucky we caught it early. It's good it hasn't spread. Even the tiniest bit of cancer can be devastating the first time you hear it. And we have to let patients come to terms with their initial feelings instead of just plowing on. And I wanted to hug them and say, yes, this is shit, but we'll help you get through it. And I had to be called out by the breast care nurses saying, no, you're the surgeon. You still have to be the bad guy at times. That's our job. So hard. 2.5 years later, I was having a lot of pain with my implant because of radiotherapy, and I was planning to go flat. And my surgeon looked at a nodule of scar tissue that I'd had on my chest wall, and she just said, let's just get an ultrasound. 3 centimetre local recurrence on my chest wall. And I'm a breast surgeon, and I just thought it was scar tissue. And that meant going flat, and that meant more radiotherapy to an area that had been previously treated. And that meant that I had to retire because I couldn't use my left arm properly. And psychologically, I couldn't deal with treating breast cancer patients. I had my ovaries removed so I could switch treatment, and I just felt I am lost. I am now living in this world of very few patients like me because there aren't many local recurrences. There aren't any trials about local recurrence because there's so few of us. And when is it going to come back? And is every cough a cough? And how will I get my GP to listen to me? I had no idea the thoughts that go through patients' heads. And I think it's a really good time for another poem.
Thanks, Liz. This poem is called Doctor to Patient, and it's by Catherine Murray, who's an ear, nose and throat surgeon. In winter, I was sentenced to urgent treatment. Across the road, trees in the park stretched their stark branches into the grey sky. An icy gust herded me into the hospital. 4 windowless walls, poison siphoned into veins, hair on the floor, bile in my throat. During long dark days and lingering nights and lingering days, as fans purred and machines bleeped, I was transformed from doctor to patient. I yearned for outside, I craved control, I grieved for my old self. I was on the other side. At last, I emerge from my prison, and the world is brighter than I remembered. Across the road, trees in the park shimmer their leaves in the breeze. Vibrant green boughs, proclaiming renewed life.
Again, wow, that's there's a reminder of the trauma you go through and how you hopefully turn the corner and come out the other side. Yeah, and I'm going to make you laugh now. Oh, sorry, that was the local recurrence. I forgot, I got so engrossed in talking. That was me with another arrow smiling for my local recurrence, going to have my breast removed, completely aware as to what life was going to hold for me in the future. As a consequence of that, I ended up dressing up like Mrs. Incredible. And this is all down to Partha Carr, a consultant diabetologist on Twitter, who called my husband and I the Incredibles for just how we coped through chemotherapy. So I bought my husband and I the outfits, into planning to wear them on a park run at Christmas Day, but we never did. So I thought, right, it's my last day of my second round of radiotherapy. I'm going to wear this to give the radiotherapist a laugh. And I got changed in Addenbrooke's car park in Cambridge. And I walked all the way through Addenbrooke's, through the concourse, all the way through the hospital to get to the radiotherapy department. And nobody batted an eyelid. Nobody said, this is apparently a completely normal costume for patients to wear. And apparently it went viral, and I had journalists in India calling me up about it. It's like, hang on, I've had radiotherapy. It was a bit of fun. It shows that you can have fun, and there are ways of just helping you get through things. But let's get back to reality. How did I cope? And this is not something I ever thought I'd be talking to you about, because I coped with sport. Now, at school, I did everything I could to avoid sport. Those naked communal showers, and I was bad at hockey, which meant I wasn't considered for any of the teams or athletics, even if I was good. I did everything I could to avoid it. Like most junior doctors, I would join a gym every time I moved hospital, go once, give them £1,000 and never go again because on-calls and exams got in the way. And then I started dating my husband, who bought a bike. And I became a cycling widow. And I thought, if I don't get a bike, I will never see him, because he would ride all morning and sleep all afternoon and our weekends together. And then I got bored of just cycling, and I thought, I'm going to do a triathlon. And the toe rag, he signed me up to do one just before my 40th birthday, because as a typical surgeon, I read every magazine and I read every book. And in my head, I was an Ironman, too scared to do it. And I loved it. I had just discovered sport and cycling in the mountains. And then I got cancer. And nobody told me to exercise. And this was only in 2015. And I found other cancer patients on Twitter, an amazing woman who's now sadly died, she had metastatic cancer. She was having Taxol chemotherapy every 3 weeks for 2 or 3 years. And I struggled with just 3 doses. She would cycle to chemotherapy. She would kayak, she would row, she was in the gym. I found female mountain bike athletes who were still cycling. I thought, right, they can do it, I can. I did park runs on my good weeks, very, very slowly. I cycled to chemo in the sun, where I got bollocked by the nurses who told me, your neutrophil count is really low, you might get sepsis. I'm on a bike ride in a country lane. You've just taken away all that joy I felt of just riding and feeling free before I ruined my life for 3 weeks. They had no idea the impact those words had. I begged my local cycling club to let me do a sprint triathlon during chemo. And that's that picture of me bold. It was a pool-based. I didn't tell to my oncologist because I thought she'd bollock me. But that feeling of crossing the line, knowing that I could do it halfway through chemo, I can't tell you. I was just Liz. I was no longer a cancer patient. And so a year after I finished treatment the first time around, I did a half Ironman, which is ridiculous. It's like a 1.6 mile swim and a 56 mile bike ride and a half marathon on the hottest day in the year. And I hate the color pink, but I dressed in pink with a tutu and a big wig to raise money for breast cancer now. And again, my body's amazing. It can do that after all the treatment I've been through. And it was just my way of feeling me. And we now know exercise can halve the risk of recurrence. It's the best thing for side effects. It's the best thing for fatigue. We should be telling everybody about it. That's my mini lecture over. But it's not exercise all the time, because when you're home alone and you're left to yourself with the phone at your fingertips in the middle of the night, looking at metastatic blogs or reading about how yet another friend has got metastasis and has died, dealing with that guilt, that why them, why not you? Wondering if a cough is a cough, it's really, really hard. And I had no idea that depression, anxiety, PTSD are really, really common after a cancer diagnosis. And I love this cartoon. It's really hard for people to understand what mental illness is like, especially after cancer. When we look great, how can I be depressed? I've just done a half Ironman. But that feeling is real. And sometimes you just need a couple of days just to nest and wallow and recover. I think it's perfect time to have another poem.
This poem's called Rebellion, and it's by Beda Higgins, who's a nurse. One wayward cell suggests a mutiny. Before you know it, they are telling you what will happen and that it won't go away. You shake and leave to live on the edge, teetering in the mouth of a volcano. On TV, there is war. A building collapses. It is very dark. Rescuers wear masks so they aren't infected. You envy them. You lie with your ear pressed to the ground, head idling grass. You ignore planes soaring, dogs yapping, an ambulance screaming blue panic, and listen to the earth grown gentle on its axis. There is comfort in the silence of earthworms.
Wow. That just sums up incredibly. So many emotions that people have, and you often just want that silence, just to be alone in your thoughts, to come to terms with what's going on. And I was struggling. It wasn't just the fear of recurrence, it was chronic pain. I couldn't move my arm. I felt like I had lost everything. I'd lost my identity. I'd been forced to retire. The job I spent 20 years training for had actually made me quit. I didn't feel I was a woman anymore. I'd lost my hair. I couldn't flirt. I couldn't tuck it behind my ears. I'd lost my breast. I'd lost my sex hormones, my libido. I didn't feel I was female anymore. I wanted my husband to divorce me and find a woman with 2 healthy breasts and a libido because I never wanted it. I was grieving for the child I could never have because chemo made me infertile. There's this huge aftermath of emotion that cancer brings with it. And you don't see a way out when you were right at the bottom of that hole. But somehow I had to turn myself around and go from someone sick in the middle of chemo to someone strong enough to face the rest of her life and actually look forward to the rest of her life. And that took time. I transformed myself during lockdown because I thought I can't preach about exercise and not do it. And I got really fit and it was hard, but I don't recognize the strength in that woman. You don't see it every time you look in the mirror. And sometimes photographs are a fantastic way of helping patients catalogue what they've been through and see how far they've come. But how did I get there? It's called my jar of joy. I have it here. This is it for this year. And it's my version of a gratitude journal. It's really common, write down 3 things every day that you're grateful for. God, that sounds like a lot of hard work. I'm not going to do that every day. Life is really hard. And sometimes I can't think of anything and I didn't want to let myself down. So I started this. It was New Year's Eve and I'd had a week of knowing that my cancer had grown during chemo, that I needed more surgery. I was convinced I'd be dead in a couple of years. And after a week of wallowing, my mum told me to pull my backside out of sling and get on with life. And she was right. I needed tough love. I thought, right, I'm going to start this. Every time something good happens, I'm going to write it on a card and I'm going to put it in the jar. But it's not every day. And my blooming husband put the first card in because he put on a pair of trousers he hadn't worn for years and found a £5 in the pocket. How dare you? But then he let our puppy sit on the sofa, so I got to put a card in. And there's something about seeing this build up in the kitchen when I walk past. Whenever I'm having a really bad day, a friend's died, something bad's happened, I'll pull out a couple of cards and it makes me smile. And there are kids doing this in schools and doctors doing it in offices, first in the queue for Costa, didn't have to wait an hour for a car parking space, little things. For me, it's often hearing the birds sing or seeing the first tulip arrive. And it's just my way of keeping me centered and grounded. And I think that's a great time for another poem.
This poem is called Messenger by Mary Oliver. My work is loving the world. Here the sunflowers, there the hummingbird, equal seekers of sweetness. Here the quickening yeast, there the blue plums, here the clam deep in the speckled sand. Are my boots old? Is my coat torn? Am I no longer young and still half perfect? Let me keep my mind on what matters, which is my work, which is mostly standing still and learning to be astonished. The phoebe, the delphinium, the sheep in the pasture and the pasture, which is mostly rejoicing since all the ingredients are here, which is gratitude, to be given a mind and a heart and these body clothes, a man, a mouth with which to give shouts of joy to the moth and the wren, to the sleepy dug-up clam, telling them all over and over how it is that we live forever.
I love that. And it comes back to nature. And I've been thinking a lot about, we're doing a lot of work on how to improve the care of people dying in hospital. And for me, if I only had days or weeks to live, I'd want to be able to get outside and to listen to birdsong and to smell the flowers and new cut grass. And when you think of patients in hospitals, they don't get fresh air. They don't hear the birds sing. They don't get that feeling of wind or rain on their face. And I really think we need to try and get them outside, bring nature in. Those little moments can just raise someone's day, even if they've got hours left to live. And I think it's just something really important to think about. How can we bring the healing power of nature into hospitals and wards? I had to learn to restructure my life because I'd lost my job, I'd lost my career, I'd lost my income. And I realized I was the most boring dinner party guest in the world because I had no life outside of surgery. It had been work, eat, sleep, repeat, exam, on call. I was boring. I had no real local friends because I'd moved from Cardiff to Suffolk. It was just me and my husband, and I needed to do something about it. And this is called the wheel of life. And this is what I use when I'm talking to children, but it also applies to us. And you can kind of see that there are 7 or 8 different prongs. And the theory is, if you have a well-balanced life, if you imagine the center is 0 and the hub on the outside, for example, health is 10, you put a mark on that line where you think you are. And if you're perfectly balanced, you'll have 10s all the way around. And I'm willing to bet most of you score very low for some of them. As a junior doctor, I would never open my credit card bills because I knew I was in debt. I didn't want to see. I wasn't growing. I didn't have time to read books. It was all about exams. I didn't have any spare money to give to charity. I never went to the gym. It was all school, it's all work. And it really made me realize, if I am rebuilding my life, I can't just think about school or work. I need to focus on everything. And this is a fantastic tool you can use yourself, with your colleagues, with people you're mentoring, because it's not all about work. Because they could get cancer tomorrow, they could have their money taken away, and it's everything else that is left that will build them up. And the real thing that made a difference for me was charity. Because when I did that half Ironman, an old SHO of mine from 10 years ago sponsored me £100. She saw me on Facebook and I went, that's a hell of a lot of money for a young doctor. And I messaged her to say thank you. And I said, it's too much money. And she said, no. Every year, every month, I give a certain percentage of my salary to charity. And this month it's you. And she humbled me because that money hurt her. £100 is a lot for a junior doctor. How much was I giving away every month? I had income to spare. It really made me think. So I started doing 2 things. I started volunteering at the local park run every Saturday morning where I lose my voice shouting and cheering. And yes, it's nice to take selfies on social media, but it's that feeling of being part of a community and just giving my time and making people happy. I can't tell you how good it feels. And then to fill my days, I started mucking out hedgehogs at a local rescue shelter. It's run by an elderly couple in their 70s. And when I found one out in the garden, I saw just how overworked they were. They must look after 300 or 400 hedgehogs a year. So 2 hours a week, I'd muck out hedgehog poo. I've got ringworm at the moment because of it, but I love the hedgehogs. It's my way of giving back. And it's just that sense of rebuilding my life from the bottom up. I'd urge you all just to look at this and think, what are the little changes I can do to make me more balanced? But life is not all about work. Why aren't my slides moving? Here we go. I had to work out what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And this is a Japanese concept called ichigai. There are things that you love. And there are things that the world needs. There are things you are great at. And there are things you are paid for. And it's okay if they're not all the same thing. The goal is for them all to meet in the middle. You could say you're a doctor. The world needs doctors and you're paid for being a doctor and you may be great at it, but actually you really love sewing your own clothes or playing with old sports cars. And it's just realizing if you're not happy in your life, this is quite a good way of working out what you want to do, what you're really passionate about. Because everyone told me when I had to resign as a surgeon, what are you passionate about? But I don't know. I haven't done anything. I can't remember what I used to do when I was little. And it's just little tools like this that can just help you work out what you want to do. Start planning now for retirement. Start doing stuff now. Don't wait, because you never know what's going to happen. I love this cartoon. I love Charlie Brown. I used to have a duvet, my sick duvet when I was off school as a kid had Snoopy all over it. And I think for me, the big thing was realizing I have had cancer twice and there's a strong chance I will die before I thought I would. And I'm actually scared of dying because as a doctor on a crash team, I've seen the worst deaths in the hospital. I didn't get called to see the peaceful, serene deaths well managed by palliative care and the medical doctors. And I was really scared. And it was only through reading and talking to Catherine Mannix, one of the previous guests, that I understood what happens when we die. And I came to peace. And I finally got my husband to admit that I might die before him because he refused to believe that. And we finally got our will sorted and our advanced care plans and just accepted we're all going to die. We need to prepare for it. But I also started thinking, what do I want to be remembered for? Because I don't want it to just be as it would have been before I got cancer, She was a great surgeon who always came in at a weekend and always answered her emails at 10 o'clock at night and was always there to help the juniors. And nothing about me as a person, or my life, or my family, or my friends. And that is kind of how I've turned my life around. I've had to find new ways to help people. I'm almost busier now than I was as a surgeon, but it's made me realize what is important. It's memories, and it's the time we spend with people we love. And it's not all about work. And it should be okay to say to your bosses, I'm sorry, I can't do that this evening because I'm doing something for me. I won't have time to finish it because I have other priorities, because you are a person and there is more to life than your job. I had to learn that I don't have to be a doctor to help people. There are other ways of fulfilling that need that you have. And it's hope for anyone out there that life doesn't end when you think it does. And I hope that by sharing, before I stop, there's one more poem that I forgot to bring Katie into. So sorry, Katie, let's have one more poem. I got carried away.
Thanks, Liz. So yeah, this is the final poem. It's another one by Julia Darling. It's a wonderful poem. It's also, we were talking before we started with Liz about her campaign at the moment on social media to sort of get rid of myths about incorrect nutritional myths about cancer, and this poem's possibly a wonderful antidote to that as well. It's called How to Frighten Cancer. Eat slivers of delicious hams from delicatessens, straight from the paper at bus stops, licking your lips. Put on extravagant boots with furry trims, swishing skirts that flap like owls' wings. Walk up dangerous paths and gulp down mouthfuls of galvanizing air, raise up your arms and sing. Spread extra jam on everything, arrange red flowers upon the windowsill. Try not to shrink or moan. Be big, right up until the end. Don't pull down the blind. Put on that crazy hat you bought in Spain and shine.
I love that. I'm going to have it imprinted on above my desk. I think it is life is what you make it. And you all need to take a little bit of time out and make sure that you are kind to yourself. And I hope that by sharing my story of how I've overcome what's happened to me, that it can help you in the future. I'm going to stop there and open up to any questions you might have. But thank you very much for coming to listen to me tonight.